Welcome to the deep end. Believe it or not, this is our number 319. 319. Do you believe that? I don't believe it, but I'm having a damn good time. And my co-host, Marianne Rudis and Bob Hayes, what a delightful time every week to just think about the stuff that most people don't even want to think about. And this week, what's been bugging me is, where is the human family heading? Religion and the institutional value systems that got us this far, they're starting to fray and seem to have reached their point of diminishing returns, if you will. Now, we've talked about how, as the most dangerous predator species on Earth, we have become an existential threat to our own existence. We've had discourses about competition, how it drives evolution, and how war is one of the most innovative times in our history, and how the next global war may be the end of us all, maybe due to our own innovation. For those of you who know Oppenheimer, which is now becoming a code word for a line that we crossed, the Oppenheimer line. In all of this, our own spiritual senses have been based on the varied religions that are fraying, and they're rendering themselves as superstitious, delusional, or wishful thinking. What are they based on? Beliefs on beliefs. For many of us, that just doesn't work, and it stopped working. And I have to say, I am hopeful. The next stage, at least for our dear predatory species, is, in my eyes, spiritual. I don't think we're going to grow another finger. I don't think we're going to grow our brains so that they're giant brains in our heads. I think it has to do with spiritual. It's learning to use what we have, growing a spiritual sensitivity that does not rely on dogma, institution, or belief. Now, is that possible? Think about it. I want to say resoundingly yes. And one of the books that changed my thinking on this, other than the psychedelics, which keep bringing me back to you can't mess with this even if you want to, is a book called Spiritual Evolution, The Scientific Defense of Faith. It was written by George Valent. He's a psychiatrist. He heads up the Department of Adult Development at Harvard, and he's been working on different things of how faith and spirituality and neurology get together. And he was asked to write this book and given a grant to do so. Now, what he defines as spirituality has to do with the language of the heart and not of the written word. And this connection between human evolution and spirituality, it seems to be experience. And I want to share a little the peace prayer of St. Francis, although it's attributed to a guy named Besquerel. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, let me sow forgiveness. Where there is doubt, let me sow faith. Where there is despair, let me give hope. Where there is sadness, let me give joy. O Master, grant that I may not so much to seek compassion, but to give compassion. I think that lays out to me very well what I see as the neurological basis for a new spirituality, or not a new spirituality, but a new rooting of our spirituality. And that has to do with the positive emotions. And I think of these positive emotions are modes of experience and expression, defined as love, hope, joy, forgiveness, compassion, faith, which is trust in the universe, awe. All of this over and over, these emotions. And we can see that there is a huge study on the negative emotions. These negative emotions are basically associated with our alerting sympathetic nervous system. Positive emotions are associated with activity in our calming parasympathetic nervous system. You see, when we think of ideas, ideas are pretty much these sanitized things. They're colorless, they're odorless, they're valueless. But what gives them color is emotions. We know what it's like to be green with envy, blue from grief, yellow of fear, and red for rage. These colors, they take our ideas and they do something. And this is something I'm going to have to say. I'm not going to get political, but I'll say this at least. The right understands. The left is still dealing with these ideas when the right is totally got this visceral thing going. So yes, I think there is a way to overcome this. There is a way. The outcome of all this research, it clearly points to the neurological causes and correlates to the different spiritual modes of expression. Again, this is the positive emotions. And what we learn is the positive emotions, spirituality, if you will, is literally hardwired into the human brain, into the human nervous system. And it looks to me like there is a shifting of consciousness on the planet away from the institutional into the experiential. And I wonder, is there a new religion on the rise? Is spiritual experience going to find a new footing in the world to help us overcome our hate, our indifferences, our war? You see, this is the ultimate thing. It must be so, or we may not pass muster on the next rung of the evolutionary ladder. I mean, the human beings were up against it, and we're waking or dying. Can hope, love, forgiveness, compassion, and faith, awe, can they be rooted in neurology and not in mere belief? Can we create something that shows that our spiritual lives are huge and very valid? However, they're not just some hot pie in the sky thing. They're what we are, who we are. So today's question, what would the world look like? I mean, seriously, how can we create a spiritual sensibility that is based on and rooted in the real, if you will? Before I bring my cohorts into this, there's a chant that I just love, and it's very simple. And if you're driving down the road, you can just start chanting this, and it's good for you. And the chant goes like this: we are a new people. We are an old people. We are the same people, deeper than before. In our deepening, are human beings that place where the universe begins to care, evolves into care, to create fairness and justice and forgiveness, to create a community sense that shows true concern for all life, sentient or not. And that's not going to be an intellectual thing. That's going to be an emotional thing, a connecting thing that colors everything, no matter what the idea. So having said all this, spiritual evolution, is this happening? And if not, is it able to happen? And if it's able to happen, how do we contribute to it? So that's my opening statement. I'm going to turn it over to Bob first. Bob, what say you on this?
Well, I think that, as with all forms of evolution, it's happening whether we like it or not. And I think spiritual evolution is part of overall evolution. But I think that, as we've discussed many times before, humans are very different than other animals in that we have this self-concept, that we can be aware of not just what's occurring in the moment and how we're reacting to it, we can be aware of what our reactions may portend for the future. We can have a conception of the future. And you were differentiating between emotions and ideas and so forth. And I think that that really a true spiritual evolution encompasses all of them. That we can't have just ideas without the emotions that those ideas engender. And we can't just have emotions because then we just become totally reactive. We don't have the ability to pause and consider the unintended consequences of our actions or the wider scheme of things. So I think that it's happening, whether we choose to define it as a new religion, a new spirituality, or whatever. I think that what has to happen is at the individual level, we have to begin to integrate our emotions, our thoughts, our hopes, our dreams in a direction that fosters these positive emotions as you define them. And I think the more we're able to do that, the more holistically we're able to view our own self, the more we're then able to contribute to the larger culture around us. And this is something Marianne has talked about, taking action as individuals and what can we do? How can we affect the world in a more positive way? Maharishi Mahesh Yogi talked about the more people were able to meditate, how it would have effects on the world. And there's some data that support that. But I think it's all part of the same the same picture, if you will, of individuals finding their own center, their own balance, their own ability to act with compassion, with love, with energy in the right direction. And that then engenders other people to do that, and that spreads, and that's what real spiritual evolution is.
Yeah. Marianne?
Yeah. Well, mic drop there, Bob. Yeah, I think that it's happening. And I think more and more people are learning a new way to talk about themselves and to talk about life and to talk about how to actually be part of community and how to be together in the world, trying to move our species forward in where it is beneficial for all. And I think it starts with respect for all and thinking about emotions and thoughts. And sometimes it's hard to know what the difference is. Sometimes we feel an emotion and we think that, oh, this is the way I think, but it's actually how we're feeling. So I think being able to kind of separate that, we've spent the last, 100 years in intellectual pursuit and controlling our thoughts and controlling the way we think and the scientific method and how do we arrive at conclusions, and we downplayed emotions. And emotions, I think, are coming back into the forefront, especially as we watch them being so expertly being manipulated, because emotions can be manipulated. And so I think as we start to become more aware of what our emotions are and how important they are in our thinking and how important our thinking is for our emotions. So how do we control our emotions? How do we control our thoughts? And then how do we choose what we want to do based not on one thing alone, right? And I think that's where we're going to choose how we want to evolve as a species. And we're not all going to be on the same page. So what's that going to look like? How do we I when I think of evolution, I think sometimes I start to think in terms of social movements, and the women's movement, and these things that have happened that have started with a small group that have pushed people to think in a different way and harness their emotions in order to be able to affect change on a wider scale. And so as I think that's what's going to fuel us.
Yeah.
But
I have a
yeah.
couple comments. One, I disagree with Bob. Everything's not evolving. And we know that because a lot of things have become extinct because they did not evolve. And that's
part of evolution.
Yeah, that's right. But what I'm saying is that those individual whatever species or whatever, and that's my concern with the human family. That and it's not that ideas and emotions are separate. It's just that we can control our ideas, but we really can't control our emotions. I like the way that you said, Marianne, harness. I think that that's a good word. We can't control them, but I can harness them enough so that I don't get up, pick up a gun and go shoot somebody when I'm angry. So I think there's that piece to it. And I think, we have to focus more on the positive, although the negative right now is what's getting the attention. The negative right now is what is literally steering the world in ways that are quite scary. So I think the whole thing, when we harness our emotions, how do we create a larger context for the positive emotions to be expressed and experienced? Because the negative emotions are very, very cheap. They're it doesn't take much to tweak somebody with a negative emotion. So to me, we have to find a way to shift to the positive side. And how do we do that? I'm not real sure, and I'm not convinced that the human family is going to get out of this. And maybe that's why I talk about it so much, because it's I'm not a Chicken Little saying the sky's falling. I am a human being saying the sky is able to fall.
That is so true. It is able to fall. And for us to say, oh, that's never going to happen is just not even, it's not even realistic. But I think when you say the positive emotions, how do we bring those out? I think we have to choose that. And I think it's, do we want to love or do we want to get revenge? Do we want to change the way the world looks? I heard this interesting interview, and it's with Fran Lebowitz, and she was talking about revenge, and she loves to get revenge and how it's satisfying to her. And she said, I'm Jewish, and the Jewish, when Christianity came along, a lot of people went with the forgiving martyr, right? Versus the judgy Jewish God. And she said, I still judge, and I still want to get revenge, and there's deep satisfaction in that. And so I think there's this idea that all of us have got to want what you're talking about. All of us have to want to love. All of us want to entertain the positive emotions. And sometimes those negative emotions are very powerful, but so are the positive ones.
And a great example of that is after the Second World War, where the Germans did a lot more damage than they did in the First World War. People wanted justice, and all of us wanted justice. However, there was an enlightened diplomat by the name of George Marshall, and he said forgiveness should trump justice right now. And then what did he say? Cast the bread upon the water and the goodness will come to you. And that's what he did. That's what the whole Marshall Plan. For those of you who don't know, Germany, although did have there was some retribution there, But look at the two biggest economies in the 60s and 70s. What were they? Japan and Germany. Why? Because of how we treated those we defeated. We didn't subjugate them. We helped grow them into something new. We helped grow them out of the hate and into the world of prosperity where joy and compassion and hope and all those things can be active within a context. So having said all that, it seems to me what we can all agree on is we need a bigger picture. We need a bigger picture to connect ourselves to. And the bigger picture, we have to start paying attention to the visceral cues we get, how we're triggered, how those things happen. Because, it's very difficult for me to go into a situation with someone who's a Trump idea person, or actually a Trumpite, I won't say idea person, and think I'm going to be able to not be triggered. And although I do get triggered, I feel like I become more savvy. Especially the one I love is I'm not ignorant, and I asked them very quickly. I said, in the count of 5, what's the difference between stupidity and ignorance? And if they can't answer it, they've qualified for both of them in terms of my mind. So I think that there is a sense of justice, and I think Annie Leibovitz, what she's talking about, revenge, is really...
No, Fran, not Annie. Fran.
Fran Leibovitz, that she's talking about, you want to get back. You want to get back. And someone said that's why we have laws. As a cop told me when somebody he loved was shot, I said, how do you feel about that? And he says, I want to go kill him. But the law says I shouldn't and I won't. So you can see how our emotions can be kept in check in some way. Go ahead, Marianne.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, but that is an external control. I think for our spiritual evolution to occur, we have to foster our own internal control.
Right.
And we have to want to not kill because of the damage it's going to do. And the whole idea of forgive them for they know not what they do. I think Jesus said that at some point. And that's where, for me, spiritual evolution is they now are learning.
Yeah, but it's the law, and that's what King said. He said, I can't make my brother love me, but the law can keep him from killing me. And I think that that's important. And, one of the things one of you all said earlier is we can't really know love unless we've experienced it. And the law allows a greater bandwidth for people to experience the joys and the compassions and all those things, the forgiveness. It's just how do we spread them out so that it's not racist or, any of that stuff. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I'd like to come back around and there's nothing that's all internal and there's nothing that's all external. As human beings, we are both. We can't exist without both. Just as there's no idea that doesn't have an emotional component. And I like the term harnessing our emotions. But that in itself is an idea. And we, as human beings, exist in a world of ideas because we are self-aware. And we can't escape that. So we have to learn to harness the emotions, which can get out of control. There's a theory called the triune brain, which is that the deepest emotions go back to our reptilian ancestors in the back part of our brain. The more positive emotions are the mammalian brain, where love and so forth happens. But it's very easy to get knocked back into that reptilian by fear and so forth. So we have to consciously choose, as Marianne says, to harness positive emotions, because we can't move forward without them. Without an emotional component, our ideas are sterile. We don't have the motivation to do anything with them. And the emotions that motivate us.
All right, and we're at the end of our time. Marianne, do you think there's hope for the human being? Can we evolve spiritually so we can get past war, so we can get past our indifference and our hate? Final comments?
I don't know, but I do. I am working towards that end. That we can do that. But honestly, what's going to happen, I don't know. And I love that, Bob, that you said we exist in a world of ideas. And I think everything starts with an idea. Everything that we see in this world started with an idea. And if we can spread the idea that, yes, we can overcome all of these difficulties. Yes, the human species is capable of evolving beyond self-interest. Yes, we can do this. Then I think that's where I'm working, right? I just for myself and the people that I interact with. I think there's, I think there's hope, but I also am very realistic that we could be all gone tomorrow. So.
Amen, and God help us. Bob, final comments?
Okay, I'll try and make this quick, but evolution is always a question. We're either going to evolve or we're not. And that's true of every species that's ever existed and every human being that hopefully will exist in the future. We'll evolve or we won't.
Amen. I always think that what was the name of the first Star Wars? A New Hope? And I think that was a great place to start. I love hope. It's and I've shared this story before about the mice who were put in water, and right before they're ready to drown, they're saved. And then later they're put in water again with mice who had not, and those mice who had been saved swam longer than the ones who had not been saved. Hope. Hope is a belief in a future. It's an amazing thing. And, something that keeps coming around for me is this idea that what are we really? I mean, seriously, we are these thinking, caring creatures. I talk about justice all the time. But in the end, it's all energy being converted from one form to another. And so next week, we're going to go there. We're going to go to energy. What is energy? If you look at energy, if you look it up, it's the ability to do work. And if you look up scientifically, it's movement. And then you get into force. I was reading this one thing this week. In 1 second, a blade of grass gets 10 quadrillion photons punched on itself. What's going on here is more miraculous and amazing than any of us could imagine. And I think that's the cool thing about science. Our imaginations are trying to catch up to what we're seeing. It's like, whoa, how does that fit? And when we see that everything's energy, what did that scientists say? We're all stardust? Yes, we are. But we're stardust coming together in an amazing thing. I'm watching these shows with my grandson, and we're talking about predators and herbivores and how they're all necessary. The sun converts the grass. A lion can't eat the sunlight like that. So the cow eats the grass, and then the lion eats the cow. And that is energy from the sun passing down. Wow. Until then, blessings, my friend. And in all things, keep your hearts open and your emotions harnessed in the name of the one who is what the fuck it is.